A warm welcome to Revenge of Love Tales. We appreciate each one of you being here. Before we begin, we'd love to know which corner of the globe are you watching from. Share with us in the comments. Now let's dive into today's story. My name is Ivy, and the moment I learned about my cancer diagnosis, both my mother-in-law and husband turned their backs on me. Our marriage, which was supposed to endure sickness and health, crumbled when my husband Derek realized that my time might be limited. Choseto run away and ghost me. Fortunately, I found solace in the unexpected support of my father-in-law Theodore, who turned out to be the father-in-law of the century at 31 years old, facing the devastation of cancer after a couple of challenging months. Was unexpected. However, what truly baffled me was the audacity of my mother-in-law Marlades. Spite the vows of marriage, she compelled Derek to abandon me, claiming there was no hope left. Such heartlessness is beyond comprehension. Marla's monstrous side, rooted in an inflated sense of self-importance, always fueled her judgmental remarks. While economic differences between our families were not substantial, her family's additional wealth of around 500 created a sense of superiority beyond finances. Our relationship faced the common misunderstandings found in any marriage. However, with my mother-in-law, these clashes escalated to toxic levels. She consistently mistreated me based on her misinterpretations, making it a painful experience with Derek occasionally attempting to mediate. The turning point came 7 weeks ago when I received the gut-wrenching cancer diagnosis initially. We tried to come to terms with it, but my mother-in-law's behavior became increasingly erratic and toxic. Her influence over Derek grew, and her misinterpretations led to painful situations. A few days after sharing my diagnosis, she callously suggested Derek move to the bedroom TV, since I would soon be confined to bed, adding insult to injury. When I implored Derek to address his mother's insensitivity, he initially complied, only to later join in her heartless laughter. He dismissed my feelings, asking me to chill out and take a joke as they continued their classless jokes and mockery. Even in the absence of Theodore, my father-in-law, I felt isolated and defenseless. Theodore, often away from home, preferred the company of friends, leaving me vulnerable to them. Other Sundu's heartless antics, I endured their absurdities while grappling with my health struggles, a situation that would be almost comical if it weren't painfully real. Fortunately, we didn't have children, and as time passed, it became evident that Derek was far from an ideal partner for parenthood. While not entirely monstrous, they occasionally lent a hand, often accompanied by backhanded comments and negativity. Drained and worn down, I couldn't summon the energy to wage wars or respond to hurtful words in my already burdened heart. The worst was yet to come, and it arrived on a day when Derek was absent due to work commitments as my health deteriorated with regular bouts of sickness and loss of control over my senses. Theodore out of the house, it fell upon Marla to handle the mess, while there were no jokes that day. Her silent treatment spoke volumes, dispelling any doubts about her feelings towards me. Hint: she did not like me. It was evident she was growing tired of me, and the scariest part was that she didn't shy away from showing it. In desperation, I suggested hiring a nurse. To lighten the load, you'd think it was a reasonable solution, but according to Marla, Theodore had refused to even consider it. In a conversation I was convinced she had never had with him. In my presence, I couldn't help but believe that if he knew of my suffering, he wouldn't deny me help. However, according to Marla, they were already taking care of me, and the nurse would be a waste of money. This wasn't an isolated incident. It happened multiple times. Despite living comfortably with her husband's money when I needed genuine help, there was silence. To add insult to injury, she started encouraging Derek to meet new people, by which she meant women. Different women. Initially, I thought she wanted him to connect with those descending with sick relatives like me, but I was wrong. Her ulterior motive was clear. She wanted him to get in touch with women to easily replace me. At first, Derek played the role of the faithful husband, but slowly his behavior changed. Late nights, out-transformed into late-night phone conversations, audible as I drifted in and out of sleep. The gravity of the situation became painfully clear 2 weeks ago in the middle of my afternoon nap, when I heard the front door open and then shut, followed by the murmur of multiple voices, mostly female, filling the living room. I knew Marla was in the house. Derek was at the office. It was just 9 days ago that one of these women returned, making it evident that her visit wasn't for me. She came to see Derek. They stayed in the living room, seemingly acting decently, but my intuition sensed something was off. My suspicions were confirmed When Marla left me alone sneaking out of the house, assuming I was already asleep, I couldn't decipher what happened between them in that single hour, but I knew they were making plans that didn't include me. The peculiar thing was that this woman never visited me. She was always there for Derek. 5 days ago, Marla approached me, announcing that she had arranged for a nurse to take over my duties. I couldn't help but question her abrupt change of heart. Her response was absurd and infuriating. They were leaving me. When pressed for an explanation, she casually answered that they needed space. To accept that I would soon die, I was left dumbfounded. It made no sense. That wasn't a reasonable reaction to my situation. According to her logic, she had found a new woman. For Derek, someone perfectly healthy, as if my illness was repulsive. According to her, Derek needed space to move. On. How heartless could one person be? It was beyond comprehension, beyond any semblance of human decency. Their grand idea was to leave me on my own while they enjoyed their newfound freedom, not burdened by their responsibilities of caring for a sick person. Marla had found a replacement for me, a potential wife for Derek who would conveniently step into my shoes. The moment I passed away, the audacity of it all was staggering. She expected me to accept this fate because I was battling cancer, as if my diagnosis granted them the right to abandon me. I attempted to talk to Derek about the situation, but he conveniently avoided me as much as possible. In the brief moments we spoke, he reassured me not to worry too much, and before I knew it, they were gone. Amidst these sudden developments, another strange occurrence took place. My father-in-law, who had always kept his distance, started calling and messaging me. The nurse stepped up, tending to my every need from cooking to cleaning. Everything that Marlon and Derek had promised but failed to deliver. Marla initially paid for her, but eventually the entire responsibility fell on my shoulders, and I started using whatever savings I had left to compensate her. Theodore, who had maintained his silence during the entire fiasco, now bombarded my phone with calls and messages. In sickness and in health, Derek had promised. Yet this was his response. He proved to be nothing short of trash. Now I'm utterly curious about what my father-in-law wants. Surely he was not calling without reason. I'll update you with the top comments from the original post. Comment number 1. Look, I don't entirely want to side with your family, but it does kind of make sense why they took such big steps to preserve their own feelings. Losing somebody hurts, and I've lost several of my loved ones, and I still hate knowing them well. It would have saved me so much pain if I hadn't known them. Everybody has the right to defend themselves against that kind of pain. Your family was a little too extreme, though, and I'm really sorry for you. Cancer sounds bad enough. Maybe try contacting your own family. Where are they anyway? Comment number 2. It's a shame. Doing this isn't criminal, but the way your husband has behaved is disgusting. Forget your mother-in-law. Your husband is the biggest trashier. I wonder what your father-in-law wants. But maybe you should talk to him once. As well, maybe he wants to say something important. Update number 1. My father-in-law and I had a conversation, and now we find ourselves living in the same neighborhood. He spent a fortune to rent the nearest home to where I currently live, away from his wife and son. Yeah, it might sound surprising, but after years of silence, he finally found the courage to speak up. 7 days ago, he reached out to me again, and I decided it was time to confront the truth. Siena's that clarifying things with Hymonts and for all would help the situation. I decided that if my family wanted to cut ties with me, I would not back down. Either dying alone would be much better than crying over crappy people like Marla and Derek in the past. 2 weeks, my health has continued to go down. I find myself bleeding profusely, and even the thought of food disgusted me. When he called, I mustered the strength to answer, ready to hear whatever he wanted to talk about the moment. I picked up the phone, immediately apologized for staying silent for so long, and did not shy away from accepting whatever his wife and son did to me as wrong. He confessed that he was not paying attention to what was going on at home, and then told me how shocked he was with their decision to abandon me. He found their actions utterly classless, crass, and intolerable, and no longer wanted to stay with them. That's why he reached out to me, well, since I held no grudge against him and was in a desperate situation. I accepted him back into my life at that point. I was far too tired to care much about the details, and so for the past 7 days, we've been living as neighbors. He comes over to check up on me 3 times a day, and has also decided to take the responsibility of paying for my nurse with her weekly payments. But that's not really what is developing in these past weeks. There are a couple more things that happened. Allow me to explain. When the news of my father-in-law staying with me reached my mother-in-law and husband, they acted very swiftly. They reached out to him first, leaving voicemails, sending messages. They kept apologizing to him and then asked if he was upset with them. My father-in-law showed me every single message. It was comical to me because it was obvious why they were so desperate. They were heavily dependent on him and could not afford anything. My father-in-law getting upset at them, well, it's none helping, but here, remained silent, ignoring every call and message. Days turned into a week, and their desperation started to grow. Suddenly, they started bombarding me with phone calls and messages. At this time, neither the calls nor the messages stopped initially. Their messages had been about little things, but now it was about them at my father-in-law's suggestion. I made a decision not to answer their calls or messages. Their newfound concern felt fake, and it was evident they did not care for me, but for themselves. Who wants to play that game? I was sick, but I was not a doormat. Their desperation reached an absolute peak when they showed up at my door with a bag of fruits and lots of words of sympathy. Before my nurse or I could update them about my health, they started probing about my father-in-law's whereabouts. Since he was neither at my house nor theirs, I replied, just as he'd instructed me to in such a situation. I explained that his office was nearby, and staying here saved him extra cash he would be required to spend from the new place they stay at. They were not content with my response financially. They had always been well off, and my explanation likely did not fulfill their assumptions. Regardless, they accepted it at face value, seemingly uncaring whether it was true. They again asked me about my health, stayed some 5 more minutes at my home, and then told me that they needed to be somewhere important, but I did not care. I wanted them to leave already. She said they would leave in a while, and I was not sure what they wanted, but I hoped that they would have the sensibility to address what they had done to me. At the very least, I expected her to offer me an explanation for their actions. I assumed I could ask for that much, but sensibility was clearly beyond their grasp. Instead of doing any of that, my mother-in-law dropped the bomb while Derek was in the kitchen. She revealed that Derek was getting interested in the women he was seeing. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. Even though I had sensed their intentions, I was not shocked that they had made these kinds of plans, as it was clear from the beginning. But that they were dead serious about going through with it was another matter. This was no elaborate joke. I was still CNAVE. It had only been a little over a month since my diagnosis, and they were already going to such lengths to distance themselves. As one of my comments pointed out, is this how you defend yourself against the potential of getting hurt? By isolating the person in need? The audacity of that woman knew no boundaries, and if that was not enough, she claimed that she had planned a few dates for Derek and the other women. My nurse, bless her, tried to put an end to this cruel conversation, informing my mother-in-law that I needed rest. Then she mentioned her hopes that I might attend, quote, at least his engagement party. Yeah, the audacity rises, but she did not stop there. Oh no. She promised to send me the divorce papers on Derek's behalf. Indifferent to any response I might have, according to her, it was better to handle the paperwork before I lost my senses, as if I were on the brink of insanity. Yeah, her logic, it would save Derek potential heartache, and the divorce would allow him to get over me quickly with this new woman by his side. My nurse, her eyes fixed on me, probably wondered how I was managing to endure such insanity yesterday. True to her promise, she sent the divorce papers, and Derek had already signed them, along with a confirmation from his side indicating that he did not care about me at all. Although deeply hurt, I cannot say I was entirely surprised. I always knew what they were, like instead of reacting impulsively as I desperately wanted to. I waited to share this news with my father-in-law. When I told him about the divorce papers, he looked not just disgusted and disturbed, but also betrayed. After spending countless years with his son and wife, he must have held out some hope for decency and compassion, and he made a promise he vowed to take his weekend off the next week, setting aside time for us to confront this legal nightmare together. I was not sure about his intentions, but facing a more stable person while I was DCNing with my illness seemed like a better option than DCNing with it on my own. Update number 2. He came over to my place and then told me that he had been thinking over some things for some time now. When I questioned him about what he meant, he introduced me to his lawyer DCNing with our case. He informed me that his first words to the lawyer were that he had given enough time for his wife and son to come around, that since he saw no improvement in their behavior, he was going with the plan, and I knew what he was planning on. That particular weekend, he came to my home with his lawyer. I was excited about whatever he had in store. We began discussing the divorce situation. And then he dropped the news on me. The thing he said he had been contemplating for a while. He wanted to make changes to his will, even with his lawyer attempting to discuss the matter seriously. He kept insisting that he had thought enough on the topic and did not want to think about it anymore. It took an entire day of intense discussions. But by the day's end, I found myself a sole heir to every possession that he owned. He had cut them out entirely, leaving them with nothing more than a small plot in a barren countryside. A worthless piece of land that had nothing around for miles. And miles I knew my father-in-law had just made their lives harder, and I thought that was the end of it. But then he surprised me again. He summoned another pair of lawyers and they were discussing divorce. Yes, you read that right. It was no longer solely about me. My father-in-law was on the brink of making the most important decision of his life. He planned not only to strip his wife of everything, but also to divorce her. Overnight, he looked at me and asked if I was all right with divorcing Derek. After everything Derek put me through, I did not need to think twice about it. I responded firmly, stating that after all this betrayal, I would be a fool to stay with him. And just like that, it was settled. I was going to divorce Derek. And my father-in-law was going to divorce his wife Marla, and there's no turning back. The lawyer suggested we wait at least a month before filing for divorce, so that it would not look too hurried, and planned to the court. We just agreed to wait. While all this was going on in our homes, my mother-in-law kept badgering me to sign the divorce papers. Derek's silence was less annoying than whatever she was doing. It was like she wanted to get rid of me. I hoped that in the days to come she would have to deal with wilder consequences than Derek had tried to tell her off. Giving my chemotherapy treatment as an excuse, hoping that she would stop, to some extent it worked. She lowered the frequency of calling me, but her demands never ended. She even dared to send me a picture of the women she intended for, Derek adding insults to the injury. With her questioning, "Isn't she pretty?" For Derek care to explain to me if you would have dealt with something like that. However, all of her crafty behavior only made my father-in-law more determined. He never forgot to apologize for his wife's behavior, and in a mere 5 days this month will end, and both my mother-in-law and Derek will receive the consequences of their actions. My mother-in-law will get a legal notice, and Derek will receive those signed divorce papers he wants if all goes according to plan. This would be the end of our interactions on all levels. Update number 3, the divorce. Bombshell shook George's world, much to my amusement. She had been prepared for many things, but not for this. Upon receiving the legal notice, she dropped a storm of calls on my father-in-law's phone. When he refused to answer, she stormed over to both our places, demanding an explanation. My father-in-law was at my place for his routine checkup, and he had no choice but to tell her the blunt truth in my presence. He was tired of her and had contemplated this step for a long time. It was clear why he preferred the company of his friends over staying at home with his wife immediately. She broke down almost on her knees. She pleaded with him not to leave, and it was at that moment that the insanity had hit her. My father-in-law kicked her out of his life. Then Derek barged in, and because his parents were divorcing, he was now worried about himself. He knew things were not going to end very well for him, and he promised me that he did not want a divorce, but his mother forced him to have it. I told him I didn't care. This entire momsen drama went on for the whole day until they left in the evening, empty-handed and hopeless. The legal proceedings were progressing relatively smoothly, and just when it seemed like we were on the verge of closure, my father-in-law dropped the truth. He claimed to have nothing to his name. Despite this, the court still ordered him to pay a certain amount of money to Marla each month. It was a financial loss for us, but my father-in-law was relieved to have finally cut her off from his life. Meanwhile, the issue with the will was yet to be out in the open, and the court admonished Derek for abandoning me and told him to pay me. Cianamini, we hoped that with everything settled, life would finally calm down, and I would be able to deal with my upcoming painful months in peace without any of their drama. However, our hopes were shattered when Marla and Derek unexpectedly showed up at my house for yet another meeting. During their unexpected visit, they came up with an idea, a negotiation of sorts after they found out the truth about the will. If they had approached it differently, it might have felt sympathy. But they chose to be cruel. Marla, in her typical manner, claimed that since I was not going to live long, it made no sense for him to hold so much property in my name. I just brushed off her words. I had already made a decision with my father-in-law. Weck knew what was going to happen. As tensions escalated, Derek viewing my response as an insult to his mother, immediately thought of violence and raised his hand against me. My nurse immediately called the police, and by the time they arrived, the mother and son Joe have fled the scene using my nurse and my father-in-law's witnesses. I asked for a restraining order given my fragile state due to my illness. It did not take long for the order to be issued. The court warned Derek about his behavior, stating that repeating such actions would lead to an immediate charge. No questions asked since then. None of those to have contacted either of us, and honestly considering my health, I don't care. The doctors gave me a time limit now, and I'm just hoping I prove them all wrong. Other than that, no new drama. I'm glad most of you were respectful enough. And yes, I might have liked a couple of dark jokes you played on me, by the way. I've got none. And that's why this entire thing was so hard for me. Top comments from the final update. Comment number 1, you're the literal definition of taking everything to the grave element. That's cool though, your father-in-law's smart decision saved you big time. Because honestly, it's so rare to have that kind of thinking person around you. It's true that you may not live long, but the way your family reacted, wow, that was extreme. I'm glad. I've never dealt with something like this. They're toxic as hell. At least they will die. Poor comment number 2. I'm so curious, is the woman you're talking about. Didn't she, know that you're sick? How could one woman be summoned to another? I mean, where's the sisterhood all for a dang man and one that would not even stay faithful to the same woman he vowed to stay with for all his life? Like, wow, I'm so glad I like girls. Because honestly, this is too much for me. Good luck soon. I hope you win this war. Well, we just reviewed 2 of the comments, and I have to agree with the last one. I can't believe somebody would be so mean to somebody else, knowing that they were battling such an illness, but yet Sienna had to deal with this mother-in-law of today's story. That was an absolute nightmare. Lucky for OP, she did have her father-in-law who went so far to try to save her, get her back, give her support, and basically get her to cut out the toxicness, which was unfortunately his son and his wife. I want to know your thoughts on this one. Guys, go ahead, drop your comments down below. This one was an intense one. It had sad moments, it had exhilarating moments, but overall, it looks like karma came again. So drop your thoughts down below, guys. I narrate these sorts of stories every single day. If you guys want to be a part of these daily videos, all you have to do is subscribe to the channel, hit that like notification, and well, I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow.